This isn't some fictional tale I cooked up. It's a story from my own life, something that actually happened to me a few years ago. It's funny how a single moment, a single sound, can change everything. The clinking of wine glasses and the low hum of conversation at our dinner party died the instant my fiancé, Liam, let out a short, sharp laugh. I was standing by our polished concrete coffee table in our Austin apartment, my hands trembling slightly as I presented the delicate, handcrafted world I had built inside a hollowed-out vintage copy of Moby Dick. His laughter, sharp and dismissive, sliced through the room, and in that moment, under the warm Edison bulb glow of the home he always reminded me we couldn't afford without his salary, I saw my future shatter. He looked at our friends, a smug, pitying smile on his face, and said, "Isn't that adorable? My Clara wants to sell her little book dioramas online. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows." It had started as my secret escape. My day job was a soul-crushing grind in digital marketing for a soulless tech company in North Austin. I spent 8 hours a day optimizing click-through rates for products I couldn't care less about, drowning in a sea of beige cubicles and corporate jargon. My evenings were my sanctuary. In the small spare bedroom that Liam had designated as storage, but I had quietly claimed as my studio, I gave old, forgotten books a second life. I'd spend hours with tweezers, antique paper, and miniature modeling clay, meticulously recreating tiny, detailed scenes from the stories within their own pages. A miniature, glowing lamppost for Narnia inside The Lion, The Witch, and the Wardrobe. A tiny, windswept moor for Heathcliff inside a weathered copy of Wuthering Heights. It was my art, my meditation, the one thing in my life that felt wholly and truly mine. Liam called it my hobby, a word he always pronounced with a faint, almost imperceptible curl of his lip. To him, hobbies were things you did to kill time, like his golf game or his fantasy football league. They weren't supposed to mean anything, but this meant everything to me. For months, I'd been working up the courage to turn this passion into something more. I'd researched Etsy, studied product photography on YouTube, and meticulously crafted my first 5 pieces for the launch of my store, which I planned to call Literary Nooks. The Moby Dick piece was my magnum opus, with a tiny hand-carved whale and a churning, resin sea that looked like real water. I was so proud of it I could barely breathe. That night was supposed to be a small celebration. Liam had invited his closest friends over, our friends, I corrected myself, for dinner at our apartment in the Domain, a place defined by its sterile luxury and high-end chain restaurants. It was a world of finance guys and corporate lawyers, a world Liam navigated with the sleek confidence of a shark. I always felt like I was wearing a costume. "Let me show you guys what I've been working on," I'd said, my voice bright with a nervous energy I couldn't contain. I brought the 5 books out and arranged them on the coffee table. There was a moment of genuine curiosity. Ashley, a friend from law school, leaned in, her eyes wide. "Wow, Clara, these are incredible. The detail is insane." But then all eyes shifted to Liam, waiting for the verdict from the man who paid the rent. He picked up the Moby Dick, turned it over in his hands as if it were a strange curiosity he'd found at a garage sale. That's when he laughed. It wasn't a kind chuckle. It was a dismissal. Jessica, Liam's work colleague whose razor-sharp smile never quite reached her eyes, joined in. "Oh, bless your heart," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's a cute little arts and crafts project. Are you going to open a table at the farmer's market?" The others chuckled along, a chorus of polite, damning amusement. They were his friends first. I saw it then, with blinding clarity. I was just an accessory he'd chosen, one that was suddenly malfunctioning. I looked at Liam, pleading with my eyes for him to defend me, to tell them they were wrong, to show even a flicker of the pride I so desperately needed from him. He just shrugged, setting the book down with a soft thud that echoed in my chest like a gunshot. "Babe, it's a great hobby. It really is. But a business? Let's be realistic. Who's going to pay real money for that?" He gestured vaguely at my heart's work, now sitting on the table like evidence in a trial I had already lost. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over me. I felt my face flush, my throat tighten. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. I managed a tight, brittle smile and started gathering the books, my creations, my little worlds. "You're probably right," I mumbled. "It was just a silly idea." But as I carried them back to my studio, the sound of their renewed laughter following me down the hall, something inside me didn't break. It hardened. It turned from fragile glass into something cold and sharp and clear. The war hadn't even been declared, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was going to win it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Liam, listening to his even breathing, and felt a chasm opening between us. The man I thought I loved, the man who was supposed to be my partner, had held my heart in his hands and casually crushed it in front of an audience just to maintain his social standing. The memory of his laugh played on a loop in my head, each time chipping away at the foundation of our 3-year relationship. It wasn't just the mockery. It was the utter lack of belief. He didn't see me. He saw a quirky accessory, a girlfriend with a cute little hobby that was acceptable only as long as it remained a quaint, unprofitable pastime. The moment I tried to give it value, to claim it as something more, it became an embarrassment to him. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead as he left for the gym, his usual routine. "Big day at the firm," he said, already focused on his world of mergers and acquisitions. "Don't work too hard on your, you know." He couldn't even bring himself to say it. My art, my business. That was when the suspicion began to bloom into a dark certainty. It wasn't just last night. It was a pattern. I started replaying months, years of tiny cuts I had ignored. The way he'd steer conversations away from my passions at his work functions, introducing me as a marketing guru, but never as an artist. The time I'd won a small local art prize and he'd dismissed it as nice for my portfolio, as if it were a school project. The way his eyes would glaze over whenever I tried to explain the intricate process of my work, his attention already drifting back to the stock market ticker on his phone. The discovery wasn't some hidden affair or secret debt. It was something far more insidious. I was discovering that the man I was building a life with had absolutely no respect for the core of who I was. His love was conditional, predicated on my staying in the neat little box he'd designed for me. The ambitious, successful partner was his role. Mine was to be the adoring, supportive girlfriend whose own ambitions were harmless and small. My Etsy store wasn't just a business venture. It was a rebellion. And he knew it. His power was subtle but absolute. He controlled our finances, our social life, our future. He would often talk about our 5-year plan, which was, in reality, his 5-year plan that I was simply a passenger in. It involved him making partner, us buying a house in Terrytown, and me possibly transitioning to a less demanding role once we had children. Every conversation about the future was anchored by his career, his income, his success. My own career was treated as a temporary placeholder. "Once I close the Henderson deal," he'd say, "we'll have enough for the down payment, and you won't have to worry about that stressful marketing job anymore." It was framed as a gift, but I now understood it for what it was, a gilded cage. He wanted me dependent. He wanted me to be a reflection of his success, not a source of my own. His disapproval became a constant, low-grade hum in our apartment. When I spent a weekend photographing my 5 launch pieces instead of going to brunch with his friends, he was audibly disappointed. "Jessica was asking where you were," he'd say, a subtle accusation in his tone. "I told them you were busy with your project." He made it sound like I was in the garage building a birdhouse. A week after the disastrous dinner party, I launched the store anyway. I did it quietly, in the middle of the night, my heart pounding with a mix of terror and exhilarating defiance. I uploaded the photos, wrote the descriptions, and set my prices. Prices that felt terrifyingly high, prices that screamed, "This is valuable." For 2 days, there was nothing but silence. The Etsy dashboard showed 0 sales, 0 views, 0 anything. Liam seemed almost smugly satisfied. "See? The market's saturated, babe." "Don't feel bad," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder in a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt suffocating. I was beginning to feel foolish. Maybe he was right. Maybe it was just a silly dream. That evening, we had the fight that changed everything. I was packing up a book to take new photos, and he walked in, tossing his gym bag on the floor. "You're still doing this?" he asked, his voice flat. "I'm not doing this, Liam. This is what I do." "It's who I am," I shot back, my patience worn to a thread. "Clara, be serious," he sighed, the picture of weary condescension. "It's a hobby, a fun little thing to do on the side. But you're treating it like it's a real Job. My parents are asking what you're up to, and I don't even know what to tell them. Tell them I'm starting a business, I said, my voice rising. Tell them I'm an artist. He actually laughed again, that same cutting, dismissive sound. An artist? You make tiny furniture and books. My niece does that with her dollhouse. The cruelty of it stole my breath. That's a horrible thing to say. No, what's horrible is that you're deluding yourself, he snapped, his voice turning cold. You're investing all this time and energy into some pathetic little dream that's going nowhere, and you're dragging me into it. Pathetic little dream. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and final. I looked at him, at his handsome face twisted with a frustration that was really just contempt, and the last vestiges of my love for him withered and died. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange glacial calm settled over me. I turned my back on him and walked into my studio, closing the door softly behind me. I sank to the floor, surrounded by my tiny, perfect worlds. For a moment, I felt the crushing weight of his judgment, of my own failure. Then, I looked at the Moby Dick piece sitting on my workbench. I saw the tiny ship, the mighty whale, the endless stormy sea. It was a story of obsession, of a relentless, all-consuming pursuit. And in that moment, sitting on the floor of my cramped studio, I found my own white whale. It wasn't just about selling a few crafts online anymore. It was about proving him wrong. It was about building an empire so vast and undeniable that his laughter would be drowned out by the roar of my success. I picked up my phone, logged into my marketing accounts, and began to plan my war. The first shot was fired at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was a small, almost insignificant event in the grand scheme of the universe, but to me, it was a thunderclap. An email notification lit up my phone screen. Etsy, you've made a sale. My heart leaped into my throat. I fumbled to open the app, my hands shaking. Someone in Portland, Oregon, a stranger named Eleanor, had just paid $250 plus shipping for my Pride and Prejudice diorama. $250. For something I had made with my own two hands. It was real. A wave of validation so powerful it almost brought me to my knees washed over me. It wasn't a pathetic dream. It was a business. I wanted to wake Liam up, to wave the phone in his face, but I stopped myself. This victory was mine alone. I didn't need his approval anymore. I packed that first order with the care of a surgeon, writing a heartfelt, handwritten thank you note to Eleanor. That single sale was the fuel I needed. I dove into the business head first, treating my Etsy store not as a side hustle, but as my primary mission. My corporate marketing job became the side hustle, the thing I did from 9 to 5 to fund my real work. My evenings and weekends were a blur of creation and strategy. I became a student of e-commerce, devouring every article, podcast, and YouTube tutorial I could find on SEO, social media marketing, and brand building. I learned that the Etsy algorithm favored stores that listed new items frequently. So I pushed myself, creating smaller, less elaborate pieces, tiny, glowing fireplaces inside copies of A Christmas Carol, misty forest scenes in The Hobbit, that I could produce more quickly to keep my shop fresh. I started an Instagram account for literary Nooks, spending hours staging and photographing my work in beautiful, atmospheric light. I used the skills from my day job, the ones Liam indirectly paid for, to target my posts toward book lovers, librarians, and art collectors. I wrote captions that told the story behind each piece, connecting with customers on an emotional level. Sales started to trickle in, 1 or 2 a week, then 5, then 10. Each cha-ching notification from the Etsy app was a tiny rebellion. Liam noticed the growing pile of shipping boxes by the door. His condescension slowly morphed into a kind of irritated resentment. Is our entire apartment going to be a post office now? He'd complain, nudging a stack of boxes with his foot. He hated that this thing he had dismissed was now taking up physical space in his perfectly curated life. He hated that my attention was no longer solely focused on him and his needs. The turning point, the moment the trickle became a flood, happened about 2 months in. I had sent one of my favorite pieces, a detailed recreation of the Mad Hatter's tea party inside a vintage Alice in Wonderland, to a popular book blogger I admired. I didn't ask for a review. I just sent it as a gift, with a note telling her how much her work meant to me. I never expected to hear back. A week later, I was in a mind-numbing marketing meeting about synergy and deliverables when my phone began to vibrate uncontrollably in my purse. I ignored it, but it wouldn't stop. When I finally excused myself and checked it in the hallway, my jaw dropped. The blogger had posted a video of her unboxing the gift. It was a genuine, tearful, ecstatic reaction. She gushed about the craftsmanship, the artistry, the magic of it. She called it the most beautiful gift a book lover could ever receive. She had over 2 million followers. By the time I got back to my desk, I had 112 new orders. By the end of the day, it was over 300. My entire inventory sold out. I had to put my shop on vacation mode just to stop the flood. That night, I sat on my studio floor, surrounded by a mountain of order slips, and I just laughed. It was a wild, joyful, slightly hysterical sound. This was it. This was real. Liam came home and saw the printouts covering the floor. "What the hell is all this?" he asked, a look of genuine shock on his face. "Those," I said, a grin spreading across my face that I didn't even try to contain, "are orders. My pathetic little dream is sold out." He didn't know what to say. For the first time since I'd known him, Liam was speechless. The ground was shifting beneath his feet, and he was terrified. His control was slipping, and in its place, something wild and powerful was starting to grow. The viral moment was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was the validation I had craved, a definitive, data-driven "I told you so." Literary Nooks was no longer a hobby. It was a phenomenon. I was featured on BuzzFeed in a listicle titled 27 Gifts for the Bookworm Who Has Everything. My Instagram followers skyrocketed from a few hundred to over 50,000 in a week. The demand was exhilarating and utterly terrifying. I quit my marketing job the day after the blog post went live. I walked into my boss's office, gave my 2 weeks' notice, and felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I was finally the CEO of my own life. The apartment, once Liam's pristine bachelor pad, transformed into a full-blown production facility. My tiny studio overflowed into the living room. Shelves of vintage books, pots of resin, spools of wire, and rolls of tiny LED lights covered every available surface. The air smelled perpetually of old paper and wood glue. I hired a local art student, a bright young woman named Maya, to help me with prep work and shipping. The sound of her cheerful chatter and the constant whir of my Dremel tool became the new soundtrack of our home. Liam was miserable. He had lost his sanctuary of minimalist calm. More importantly, he had lost his position as the undisputed provider and success story of our household. His reaction was a masterclass in passive aggression and manipulation. At first, he tried to co-opt my success. When his friends would ask about the business, he'd jump in with a proud smile. "Yeah, we're just slammed," he'd say, using "we" as if he'd spent a single second helping me. "It's a great little business I encouraged her to start." The lie was so audacious it left me breathless. I started correcting him, coolly and politely, in front of everyone. "Liam's been focused on his work at the firm," I'd say with a saccharine smile. "I've been running the business myself with my assistant Maya." The "we" stopped pretty quickly. When that didn't work, he pivoted to feigned concern. "Babe, you look exhausted," he'd say, massaging my shoulders as I hunched over a tiny project at 2 a.m. "Is this really worth it? You're running yourself into the ground. Maybe you should scale back, take fewer orders. We don't need the money." It was a transparent attempt to regain control. He couldn't stand this new reality where my income was beginning to rival his, where my name was the one being featured in online articles. He wanted me to be small again. He wanted his cute little hobbyist back. The more successful I became, the more resentful he grew. He complained about the mess, the smell of paint, the fact that I was too tired to go to his corporate dinners. He was a man watching his perfectly constructed world crumble, and he blamed me for holding the sledgehammer. Our conversations became strained, transactional. The love and intimacy we once shared had evaporated, replaced by a tense, unspoken power struggle. I knew the relationship was over. I had known it since the night of that first dinner party. But I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. I was building something, and I refused to let the drama of a breakup derail me. I compartmentalized my heart, packed it away, and focused on the work. I set a goal, a number that seemed both impossible and deeply satisfying, $200,000 in revenue in the first 6 months. It became my singular focus. It wasn't just about the money. It was a benchmark, a finish line. It was the number that would, in my mind, officially eclipse his bonus, his bragging rights, his power over me. I worked with a relentless cold fury. I streamlined my process, found better suppliers, and even started designing custom laser-cut wood pieces to make my dioramas more intricate. I was no Longer just an artist. I was an entrepreneur, a manufacturer, a logistics expert. I was building my escape, one beautiful, tiny world at a time. Liam just saw the mess. He couldn't see the empire I was constructing right under his nose, an empire that would soon render him and his opinions completely irrelevant. The end was coming, and I was the only one who knew what it was going to look like. The 6-month mark was approaching, a date that loomed in my mind like a new year. It was a silent anniversary of that first, humiliating dinner party. In the interim, my life had become unrecognizable. Literary Nooks was a finely tuned machine. I had moved the shipping and receiving operations to a small storage unit nearby to reclaim some of the apartment. Maya was now working for me 20 hours a week, and I was interviewing for a second part-time assistant. I had a wait list for custom orders that was 3 months long. I was a success. Yet, I was still living with Liam, a ghost in the life we were supposed to build together. We existed as roommates, the silence between us thick with unspoken grievances. He had stopped complaining, simply retreating into a stony, resentful quiet. He knew he had lost, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. Then came the invitation, an embossed cardstock affair announcing a party at our apartment to celebrate his promotion to junior vice president. It was the culmination of his 5-year plan, the moment he had been working toward for so long. It felt like a cruel joke from the universe. He wanted to host a party celebrating his success in the very space where I had built mine. A success he had mocked and tried to sabotage at every turn. "It's going to be a big one," he said, his voice holding a trace of its old confident swagger. "All the partners will be there. I need you to be on your game, Clara. No work stuff lying around. Let's just have one normal night." A normal night. He wanted me to pack up my life, my achievements, and play the role of the proud, supportive fiancé for his big moment. A part of me wanted to refuse, to pack my bags and be gone before his first guest arrived. But another, colder part of me saw an opportunity. It was too perfect. The stage was set for a final public act. This story had started with a dinner party, with his friends, in his world. It was only fitting that it end there too. On the day of the party, a nervous energy crackled through me. While Liam was out getting his suit dry cleaned and picking up expensive liquor from Twin Liquors, I was in my studio, putting the finishing touches on a custom order. Before I started getting ready, I opened my laptop and pulled up the Etsy seller dashboard. My eyes scanned the numbers, my heart rate quickening. The gross revenue for the first 6 months stood at $198,740. I was so close. Throughout the day, as I monitored the sales, the number crept up. 199,120, 199,370. It was torture, watching the progress bar inch toward my goal. The guests began to arrive at 7. The apartment, scrubbed clean of any trace of my business, filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and loud, self-important laughter. It was the same crowd from 6 months ago, Jessica included, all of them congratulating Liam, slapping him on the back. He was in his element, the king in his castle. I played my part, smiling graciously, accepting compliments on my dress, fetching drinks. But my mind was elsewhere. I kept slipping my phone out of my clutch, refreshing the dashboard under the guise of checking a text message. At 8:45 p.m., as I was standing by the kitchen island, another cha-ching notification came through. A big one. A corporate client in New York had purchased 5 of my most expensive pieces for their office lobby. I opened the app, my thumb trembling as I refreshed the screen one last time. And there it was. Total revenue, 21490s, I had done it. A wave of profound, unbelievable calm washed over me. All the anger, the hurt, the resentment, it all just vanished, replaced by a quiet, unshakable certainty. I knew what I had to do. I waited, biding my time, watching Liam hold court. I let him have his moment, let him soak in the adoration and praise. Finally, he tapped a knife against his champagne flute, calling for everyone's attention. This was it. He stood in the center of the living room, a smug, triumphant smile on his face, and began his speech. He thanked his bosses, his colleagues, his mentors, and then he turned to me. "And of course," he said, raising his glass, "I have to thank my beautiful fiancée, Clara, for her patience, her support, and for holding down the fort while I was burning the midnight oil. We did it, babe." And in that moment, hearing him use that word again, something in me snapped. The calm remained, but it was now the calm at the eye of a hurricane. The applause for Liam's speech was just beginning to die down when I stepped forward, my expression serene. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the celebratory chatter. I have an announcement to make, too. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Liam looked confused, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes at having his spotlight stolen. I could see Jessica whispering to a friend, a smirk on her face. I let the silence hang in the air for a beat longer, savoring it. 6 months ago, I began, my gaze sweeping across the crowd and landing on Jessica. Many of you were here when I first showed you my little art project, my cute little hobby. I saw a flash of recognition, of discomfort in a few people's eyes. I then turned my gaze to Liam, who was now staring at me, his smile frozen on his face. Liam told me to be realistic, that no one would pay real money for what I do. He called my dream pathetic. A collective quiet gasp went through the room. Well, I just wanted to thank him for the motivation, I continued, a genuine, bright smile spreading across my face. Because I just checked my numbers. In the last 6 months, my pathetic little dream, my Etsy store, has made $201,490. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the polished concrete floor. Jaws were literally hanging open. Jessica's face was a mask of pale, horrified shock. Liam looked as if I had physically struck him. His face went from tan to white to a splotchy, furious red. I let the number hang in the air, a beautiful, explosive bomb. That's more than the signing bonus you've been bragging about all year, isn't it? I said, my voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. Then I slowly, deliberately pulled the diamond engagement ring from my finger. It felt surprisingly light. I walked over to the marble countertop where Liam stood, frozen, and placed the ring gently beside his untouched glass of champagne. It made a small, definitive click. I'm so incredibly proud of everything you've accomplished, Liam, I said, my voice devoid of all sarcasm. And I'm sure you'll be even more successful now that you won't have my little hobby distracting you. I'm moving out tomorrow. I need a bigger studio. I turned, without looking back at him, and walked through the stunned, silent crowd of his friends. As I reached the door, I paused and looked over my shoulder. He was still standing there, staring at the ring, his entire world collapsing in on him in front of everyone he had been so desperate to impress. I walked out of that apartment, out of that life, and I didn't stop until I heard the satisfying click of the front door closing behind me. A few months later, I was standing in the middle of my own space. Not a cramped spare bedroom, but a sprawling, light-filled studio in a converted warehouse in East Austin. The afternoon sun streamed through the massive industrial windows, illuminating the beautiful chaos of my new life. Books were stacked everywhere, works in progress covered a 10-foot-long workbench, and a whole wall was dedicated to shipping and logistics. Maya and my new assistant Ben were laughing as they packed up orders, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged room. I had a custom order in front of me, the most challenging and exciting one I'd ever received. It was for one of my favorite authors, a woman whose books had saved my life in high school. She wanted me to build a scene from her own novel as a gift for her editor. It felt like the world had come full circle. I picked up my phone to check a reference photo and saw I had a notification. It was a link to an article in a local business journal about Austin's top e-commerce entrepreneurs. There was a picture of me, smiling, in my new studio. The headline read, "Austin artist turns literary Nooks into six-figure success story." I thought about Liam and his world of 5-year plans and corner offices, a world that now seemed so small, so colorless. He always said I needed to get my head out of my books and into the real world. I guess I just built a better world instead. The end.